They thought the enemy was coming from the sky. Instead, death came from their own side, and the sea swallowed them whole. What if I told you that one of the deadliest battles of World War II wasn't even supposed to happen? That over 9,000 soldiers died, not on the beaches of Normandy, but during a training mission in England before D-Day even began. This is the story of Operation Tiger, a rehearsal for D-Day that turned into a living nightmare, a disaster so huge the military tried to bury it. So why don't we talk about it? Why isn't it in history books or war movies? That's what we're diving into today. Let me take you back to early 1944. The Allied invasion of Normandy, the biggest amphibious attack in history, is just a few months away. The stakes couldn't be higher. Hitler's grip on Europe is still strong, and the only way to break it is to punch through Fortress Europe, starting with the beaches of France. But D-Day wasn't just a wild leap across the English Channel. It took months of practice, coordination, and simulations. You don't just throw 160,000 men into battle without a game plan. And so the Allies prepared. One of those preparations was called Exercise Tiger. It was supposed to be just a drill. A big one, yes, but a drill nonetheless. Think of it like the dress rehearsal before the biggest show the world has ever seen. To pull this off, the US Army needed a location that looked and felt like Normandy's Utah beach. And they found it. Slapton Sands in Devon, England. The beach had a similar shape, similar terrain, and nearby countryside to practice maneuvers. Problem was, it wasn't empty. Hundreds of British civilians lived there. Farmers, shopkeepers, families. They were given just 6 weeks to evacuate. Their homes, their land, everything. Most left quietly. Some refused and were forcibly removed. One man later said, "We were treated like invaders in our own country, but this was war, and war waits for no one." With the area cleared, Slapton Sands became a military stage. Around 30,000 American troops would be involved in Exercise Tiger. Landing crafts, tanks, live ammunition, all to simulate the chaos of D-Day. Nothing was supposed to be left to chance. But as they say, war has a way of laughing at even the best laid plans. April 27th, 1944. The troops begin boarding their ships. Some of them are green recruits, 18, 19 years old. Some have never even been on a boat before. They're nervous but excited. After all, this is just a practice run, right? That night, a convoy of LSTs, landing ship, tanks, heads out into the English Channel. These are massive vessels, made to carry tanks and troops straight onto beaches. They move slowly, like floating barns. Easy targets if you're looking for them. And someone was looking. Unbeknownst to the Americans, a German E-boat squadron, basically fast, deadly torpedo boats, had been prowling those waters. The Nazis didn't know about Operation Tiger specifically, but they did notice a bunch of sluggish American ships moving in convoy. And that was enough. At 2 a.m. on April 28th, the German boats attacked. What followed was a bloodbath. The convoy wasn't well defended. Only one British escort ship was nearby, HMS Azalea, and she couldn't cover all the LSTs. Worse still, there had been a miscommunication. Another British escort that was supposed to be there never showed up. The Americans didn't even know they were sailing through dangerous waters. The German boats launched their torpedoes. One LST was ripped apart instantly, flames lighting up the dark channel. Dozens of men were killed in the blast or burned alive. Another ship was struck and capsized. Hundreds more went into the freezing water, screaming, clinging to wreckage, desperately trying to swim. But the water wasn't their only enemy. Most of the soldiers had been ordered to wear full gear during the exercise. That meant helmets, rifles, ammo, boots, life jackets, nearly 70 pounds of equipment. Many never made it out of the water. They sank like stones. To make matters worse, The life vests, known as Mae Wests, were unfamiliar to some troops. If you didn't secure it properly, it would ride up your body when you hit the water. Instead of keeping your head above water, it would flip you upside down. Men drowned with their legs in the air. Some survivors would later recall the screams of the dying lasting for hours, then silence. By morning, the channel was a graveyard. Official numbers vary. Some say 749 men died. Others say the real number is closer to 946. Some even believe it was over 1,000. But then there's the truly disturbing possibility. Over 9,000 total casualties when including training accidents, misfires, and friendly fire incidents across the entire Operation Tiger sequence, making it deadlier than the actual Utah beach landings on D-Day. Yes, you heard that right. The practice killed more men than the real invasion. But here's where the story gets darker. The disaster was kept secret. The U.S. military didn't release the full details for decades. Survivors were told to keep quiet. Families of the dead were given vague explanations. Even the soldiers who lived through it weren't allowed to talk, threatened with court-martial if they did. Why? Because D-Day was still ahead. The Allies couldn't afford to tip off the Nazis. They couldn't risk a morale collapse. And maybe, just maybe, they didn't want to admit the terrible truth, that hundreds of their own men had died not because of the enemy, but because of incompetence, miscommunication, and blind optimism. Let's rewind a bit and look at how this disaster unfolded before the German attack even began. One major problem? Live ammunition. The commanders wanted the training to feel real. That meant real bullets flying over soldiers' heads during the beach landings. Problem is, the timing was all off. Some landing craft were delayed, and when they finally arrived, the mock battle had already started. Friendly fire killed dozens before the real enemy even showed up. In one tragic mix-up, American gunners mistook an arriving wave of their own troops for the enemy. Chaos followed. Men were mowed down before they even stepped off the boats. Another issue? Radio communication. Different ships were operating on different frequencies. Some didn't get the memo about the German boats. Others never received the order to zigzag, a common anti-submarine maneuver. Without zigzagging, the ships became easy targets, sitting ducks in a torpedo alley. And then there was the aftermath. The bodies that washed up on shore weren't just corpses. They were liabilities. Among the dead were several officers who knew the exact details of the D-Day plans. If the Germans had recovered their bodies with documents intact, the entire invasion could have been compromised. For hours, days, the Allies scrambled to recover every body, every shred of paper, every whisper of what had gone wrong. They couldn't risk Hitler finding out what was coming. Meanwhile, back home, families got telegrams that simply said their sons had died in training. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And the men who survived? They had to board new ships just weeks later and storm Utah Beach, carrying not only rifles but the unbearable memory of their friends drowning next to them. Imagine that. You survive a massacre your own side caused, and then you're told, "Get ready, we're doing it for real." Many of them never spoke of it again. In fact, the full story of Operation Tiger didn't come out until the 1970s. A retired British official, Ken Small, started poking around Slapton Sands after buying a nearby hotel. He kept finding American military debris, helmets, dog tags, even tanks buried in the sand. The locals told him what really happened. Ken was stunned. This wasn't in the history books. No one talked about it. So he started digging, literally. He eventually raised a Sherman tank from the sea as a memorial and lobbied the US and British governments to acknowledge the disaster. Slowly, the truth came out. But even today, most people don't know about Operation Tiger. Why is that? Because it's a story of failure. It's a reminder that even the good guys make deadly mistakes, and that sometimes the real enemy isn't across the battlefield. It's in the planning room. But maybe that's exactly why we should remember it. Because the men who died at Slapton Sands didn't just die in training. They died because they were preparing to fight for something bigger than themselves. And they deserved more than silence. They deserved truth. So the next time someone says, D-Day was the turning point, remember this: D-Day didn't begin on June 6, 1944. It began in blood and chaos weeks earlier, in a forgotten corner of England, where the sea claimed 900 lives and the world kept quiet.